Welcome to the Way of Light, where we exist to engage Christians in their faith and mobilize them to be light. As you listen to these talks, prayers, and interviews, we hope you would be challenged and inspired to know Jesus more deeply and invite others to do the same.
Welcome to the first official episode on The Way of Light. My name is Zach, and I will be the host of this podcast. And you heard the voice of my beautiful wife, Kira, there at the beginning, recording the intro to our episodes. And so you're lucky you get to hear her every single episode. That is awesome. She's great. My wife is Kira. We've been married for almost 7 years now. At the time of this recording, we got married in January of 2017, and our daughter Alora is 4 years old, just turned 4 in November this year, and this journey of walking on the way of light is one I'm incredibly thrilled to take part on. I have by no means been excelling at this or been an expert. I'm an expert on the topic, but it's just something I am passionate about and feel called to share just the journey that God is taking me on, in hopes and prayer that there will be others that can relate and can follow along with me, and we can take this journey together. Some of you might wonder, what qualifies me to speak about God on the internet? What qualifies me to share the Bible and messages? Man, let me just break it all down for you. Nothing hyper qualifies me for anything that I'm doing here outside of just the stewardship and the time that I'm spending in Scripture and seeking wisdom from other people. And quite honestly, I like to joke around sometimes and say that the Pharisees in the New Testament might have called me or considered me one of the unintelligent, idiotic men who speaks with authority. And I claim that title with confidence, because quite honestly, the journey that God has taken me on over the years, and not a significant number of years by any means, has just been so impactful. And I pray and I hope that I'll be able to just share a piece of my story with you. I have been in some type of ministry since 2015. And you know what? I actually grew up in the church, so really I've been exposed to church ministry my whole life. My dad was my youth pastor, he was the children's pastor, and I was always in the church, first in the church and last out of the church, waiting for dad to stop talking to everybody. Classic pastor's kid, went off, tried to do a bunch of crazy stuff, and no, I didn't get away with much, but I definitely look back fondly on my memories growing up in the church. In the moment, not all that much, but now it's easy to look and see how powerful just God used, how much God used those years to form me for who I am today. I started in student ministry in 2018, started in ministry just serving, volunteering, or on staff since 2015, started in worship, and then landed in youth ministry and just really felt like this is absolutely my calling. This is what I was made to do. Currently, we live in Iowa in the Des Moines area. We're a part of a multi-site church, and we actually got to be a part of planting our location just over 2 years ago, and came on as the youth pastor here when we moved up to plant. Started in Oklahoma as a part of the same church there as an associate youth pastor, and I've been on staff at this church for almost 4 years. And I love what I get to do. So I'll definitely have lots of stories of youth ministry and just the things that God has been teaching me in this time. Because I truly believe that I get to reach and be a part of reaching a generation of students who are passionate about and truly have a deep longing for understanding about who God is and the depths of knowledge that he possesses, and his power and his miracles and just intimacy with God on a real deep level. And it all begins in Scripture, it begins in the Bible and in prayer. And from those places, I believe that we can change any community in the world, because the Word of God is always alive and active and moving in ways that we can never fully understand, but we have opportunities to partner with him. And here's what you can expect in this podcast as we journey on the way of light. My goal is to publish an episode every Friday. We'll do weekly episodes. And so this is the first Friday of January 2024 that this is going live. And so this is a little bit longer of an episode. Some storytelling, some teaching will take place on one Friday. And the following Friday, it will be probably a less than 10-minute episode that'll be more focused on let's pray together. I believe that by the power of prayer and us walking with God, and we can truly understand more about His will and walk in His way as we partner with Him in prayer. And we'll talk in depth about that in coming episodes as well. So that's what you can expect. One Friday of more long, in-depth. Some will be interview style, some will be teaching, and the following Friday will be specifically focused on prayer. And as we go into the content of today's episode, it has taken literally months to try and come up with something to talk about for a first episode. Let me tell you, when people say that the most difficult thing about doing anything is starting, that has absolutely been true in the process of beginning this podcast. It's been on my heart for months. But today, what I landed on and what I feel like God has just settled on my heart is really just to begin at the beginning and start by telling my own story. Because why not start with something that comes the most naturally? So today's episode is the origin story. Content creation, writing, speaking, and just anything creative has just been a passion of mine for a long, long time. I remember being 6 years old. It's one of my earliest memories of being in my living room where I grew up, spent most of my years in Central Oregon. And as we were just sitting in the living room, I remember my family was kind of doing separate things, just playing. I've got a few younger siblings I'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But I remember having this blue leather rocker, like this tiny little kid rocker. Again, I was 6 years old. And I remember, I don't know where I got this idea, but I remember tipping over this blue rocker upside down. And if you can picture it, I've got this rocker tipped upside down. And now with it upside down, I've got these curvy legs right underneath me, and I can position my hands perfectly on those pieces. And the black fabric that lines the bottom of this little rocker then became my podium. And I don't know where I got that picture or the idea for a podium, because I was pretty young to think, and I actually don't think our church at that point was quite old-fashioned enough to have podiums in the 6-year-old rooms. So just somewhere it came, must have seen my dad do it or something, but posted up my podium, and I prepared my message, and I gathered my whole family around. I got my mom, I got my dad, I got my sister, and my 2 younger brothers. I gathered everybody, or actually, I rephrase, my sister and a brother who I think might have been born at that point, but maybe not even quite yet. So at least my parents and my sister, I sat them down, and we began this. They indulged me as, my goodness, what they had never expected was the content that I presented was filled with literary genius. And my parents, they took one listen, and they 100% quit their stable full-time jobs, gave everything up because they knew, he has something special. Well, I mean, that would have been really, really cool and encouraging, but they continued to work and do the things that they were good at, and I continued to flip over blue rockers. And this blue rocker is really significant as I share this origin story, because for me, it was symbolic of something that not only I was passionate about in the moment in creativity and speaking, but really is indicative of where I am today. And the content of this episode coming from the place of creativity that was spurred on in me as a 6-year-old, like from a young age. This has been a part of who I am and who God continues to form me into. Now, my dad was actually a stay-at-home dad. His name was James. My mom was Kathy. She worked full-time. as a flight nurse in a hospital in Bend, Oregon, and she crushed it. Like, she was the best of the best at what she did, and day in and day out, she came home telling stories of dropping down on helicopters to save people in the middle of the forest. She would get on four-wheelers and ride through the woods to like rescue people who'd accidentally shot themselves in the hip out hunting, because if you know Central Oregon, you know there's a lot of hunters out in Oregon. And so she'd come home with these wild stories. She wouldn't let me go to the skate park without a helmet and pads because she'd picked up so many guys at the skate park, broken their arms and their legs, and hit their heads on the cement. And so I just remember all those stories from Mom growing up. My dad, he was stay-at-home dad, and we took a lot of adventures. Like, we did a lot of things growing up, and I wasn't homeschooled every year, but for second, third, fourth grade, and then a few other years in there, I spent a lot of time at home. And I remember my parents trying to homeschool me, and my mom poor mom, she'd come home from work and try to help me do homework, and I was a jerk. And I remember actually, like, verbally being a jerk to her. She is so forgiving and filled with grace, though. I'm thankful. But my dad, he would teach us during the day, and then he'd take us on hikes. And specifically, my sister and I have the most prominent memories of Dad being stay at home. And so we would go out, and he would pack up soup lunches. We'd go warm them up over the fire at the park, and we'd go on hikes, and more often than not, sometimes we just go out in the backyard and play games in the backyard. Like, my dad was filled with creativity. But honestly, when you've got a house of kids who are wild, and then it was my sister and I, but then two younger brothers came later on. My youngest brother's about 10 years younger than I am. He's got to be creative. Like, without the constant flow of making things fun, like, he probably would have gone mad. Why not just make the most out of time at home with his kids? And so I have his influence really in my own parenting, and I wish, and I hope, and I pray that I can leave the same lasting memories in my daughter as my dad left with me. It's pretty interesting. If you're familiar with the movie Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, it depends on your generation. That Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and Mary Poppins, I truly believe, and I'm really only vocalizing this now for the first time, but Chitty Bang Bang and Mary Poppins, I wonder if the characters in those movies became some type of mentors for my dad. Like, you think of the driver in Chitty Bang Bang, I can't even remember his name now. He's a famous actor in multiple movies. But he would just take his kids and play make-believe and play pretend all over the place. And everything became fun. Everything was an adventure. And then Mary Poppins, I mean, when she would clean the bedroom with the kids that she was babysitting, like that she was a nanny for, she would make everything fun. Let a spoonful of sugar make the medicine go down. The medicine go down. The medicine go down. Like, and of course, I'm not going to sing it for you, but the way that they entertained children in those movies and made everything an adventure. I actually believe, as my dad watched those movies with us, he was hoping that we would see an element of his own character in those characters. I think of characters like Steve Irwin. Like, you remember the Crocodile Hunter? The Crocodile Hunter was a character to just be like engrossed with. Like, I would just sit and watch the Crocodile Hunter on TV with my dad as he went and jumped on these alligators, crocodiles, and these big old snakes and lizards and tackled them to the ground. And it was so funny because it's one thing on TV, but my dad had this uncanny ability to bring out these accents and these characters wherever we would go. He would become a character just to have fun. And again, everything was an adventure where he found an opportunity to be creative. We went out as a family. We'd often go to the Oregon coast just on a family vacation. I remember one in particular where Mom and Dad took us out to the Oregon coast, and we're walking around and just looking around the nooks and the crevices of the rocks as the tide was going out, and you could see the starfish, you could see the sea anemones and the clams and all the different sea life. And my dad would look, and he wouldn't just see a starfish. He wouldn't just see a sea urchin. He would see it, and I'm going to give my best shot at this, but he would go out and say, "Hey, look at that. That right there. That's a starfish." But not just any starfish. It's got 5 arms on it. 5 arms. Some of them have 7. But you don't want to get too close because you might poke your eye out. Like my dad would like. I wish I could do it as well as my dad because he pulled out the best Steve Irwin impressions. Wherever he went, he made everything an adventure. And I loved watching him with my sister Brianna. She is just about 2 years younger than I am. And my dad really knew how to speak the language of all of his kids. Like the way that he saw her artistic abilities was like he saw her like nobody else did. And just how he spoke her language. I remember a practice that he would do with her starting from a young age. He would just take a blank piece of paper and a pencil, and he would scribble random lines all around the page, squiggly lines. It made no sense. There was no picture there. And what he would do is he'd give my sister the pencil and say, hey, see those lines? I want you to turn that into something beautiful. What an incredible picture. My sister would then take the pencil or the markers and she would turn this random chaotic mess of a page into something beautiful. And now I'm so proud of my sister. Like I cannot tell you enough how proud. I'm not sure if she'll listen to this, but I'm not sure. Like I cannot tell you how proud I am of her. Like now she's taken what from a young child, what my dad saw in her, what our dad saw in her, this creative ability, and now she's a certified tattoo artist in Little Rock, Arkansas, and just crushing it. Like she's doing all the stuff on social media and doing everything super, super well. Like she's really, really good. So proud of her. But it's so cool to see how my dad spoke into that space in her, saw her creativity. And honestly, the way that I see that picture, and I'm really just kind of processing this now, but it's my dad, he took that blank sheet and he scribbled lines all over it. And I'm reminded of the fact that how could all of this, from the way that I can look at my computer screen right now, I can see my countdown timer going because I'm trying to be a steward of time, and I can feel, I can tap my legs, I can clap my hands, I can speak. Not just me, but look at creation, the mountains, the stars. I was looking at the stars with my daughter last night out on the lawn, and I'm just like, wow, how could this, like, so what God does is, I believe that what God does is he gives us a blank page so often, and he scribbles some lines on it. And he says, hey, here's your starting point. I trust you to do something beautiful with this. And this is crazy because I'm just now understanding for the first time the incredible spiritual application of what my dad was teaching my sister, and to see where she's come is awesome. It's awesome. It's really cool. Artistically, it is so cool. And the way that my dad talked to me, he came to me being able to speak my language. He took me on adventures and he championed my theatrics. I loved theater in high school and singing songs. I remember he gave me his old guitar. I walked out on a birthday one year. He had his old guitar, an old Ibanez or a Johnson. It was a Johnson guitar on our table with a bow on it and a sheet printed out on the side of the guitar with guitar chords on it. It's just dots on lines. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? My dad says, here, put your fingers where the dots are. Here's where the strings are. And that's the only guitar lesson he ever gave. But he championed me in my learning, and he told me when it was really good, and he helped me correct when it was a little bit off. And he helped me he didn't just tell me how to do it. He showed me how to learn on my own. And so my dad gave me his guitar, started to learn, started to play music. And my dad, every time I'd write another song, the way that he would speak to me and then he would encourage me wasn't just saying, hey, that was a good song, good job. But he would identify specific lyrics or notes in the song. And he would say, hey, when you said this is what it made me think of. That was powerful, Zach. I'm really proud of you. And the way that he championed me in my artistic creativity, musically and speaking, it was just different. And he knew how to speak my language. My dad knew how to draw out in me this desire that started as a 6-year-old to flip over a blue leather chair and use it as my podium. Now that blue leather chair is now symbolic for me. of moments and experiences in life that we can look back on, that I can look back on and see, wow, God has used this to define much of who I am today. And if it wasn't for that moment, I don't know that I could look back and see this string of experiences leading to who I am now. Now, like I've said, I've established everything Dad did, he was trying to take us on an adventure. And I don't want to paint the picture that he was perfect by any means, but as he took us on adventures, one of the things, so he spoke to my sister specifically, he spoke to me specifically, and together, when it was just my sister and I before our two younger brothers were born, our dad would take us down and sit us next to the fireplace at night before bed, and we would just lay down. I really don't remember watching a lot of TV as a child. I remember my dad sitting us down next to the campfire or the fireplace in the house with the Narnia Chronicles, one of the big thick books that contained multiple books inside of it. And he would read us chapter by chapter through the Narnia Chronicles. And I remember just my sister and I both saying, "Dad, can we read Narnia tonight? Can we read Narnia?" And I'm telling you, even the most bland parts of these books, he would capture with brilliance. It drew us in. His creativity, his way of expressing himself was incredible. But he taught that to us from a young age, of how to express ourselves and what we're feeling or what we're reading or what we're experiencing. And all of those things became blue chair moments that I could look back and see my dad taught me how to be transparent or how to communicate what I'm feeling as I'm communicating in general. Just another example, my parents took us on lots of road trips. Our family is all from Canada. My parents are both Canadian, and so all of our extended family lives in Canada. We're the only side that actually lives in the States. And so we'd often take from Central Oregon, drive up to Canada, visit family for Christmas or just a certain time during maybe summer break when we weren't in school. And that was probably during the day when DVD players had just come out. We were all excited. We loved putting a movie on in the car, but quite honestly, what we loved more than a movie was Lucy Pelusi stories. Now, you probably have no idea what Lucy Pelusi stories are because my dad invented them. Like, our dad was so creative on these car rides. Like, our mom brought this sense of brilliance and on her own sense, and when it came to entertainment, like games and songs, and she was goofy. And I'll talk more about my mom in future episodes. She truly deserves her own segment. So I'm gonna leave that to the side. But as Dad told us these Lucy Pelusi stories, he took us on a journey. Like, as he's told these stories, we would embark on an adventure in the car. We're sitting there on these 18 to 24-hour road trips, sometimes stopping at one or two hotels. And he would tell these stories that would last sometimes for hours, and we would be just so engaged as he explained the story of Lucy Pelusi, often shrinking down to the size of a blade of grass and going on these adventures in a small world underground in the grass or with the bugs or riding grasshoppers. And she had this dog I can't remember the name of that was in every story, but every road trip we asked for a Lucy Pelusi story. Those were more moments that contributed to my upside down, to my blue chair moments that led to my own sense of creativity and transparency. Now, I don't mean to brush over the negativity in our home, because I know that, as so many are, we were filled with our own sense of brokenness, and there were so many things that went on that not everybody knows about, and honestly, not even I know about everything. But for the most part, I just remember both of my parents building us up in this culture of creating a culture of transparency where we could just be real, and it became normalized to be transparent. And it was something that I know that it's not common in every home just to talk about random stuff around the dinner table. I remember getting married, and my wife and we were sitting down. Actually, we might have just been dating. We're sitting down at their dinner table at her parents' house for the first time. And we start telling, I made like some sort of fart joke or something. Just, it was dumb. I was like, I think I was 17, 18. And her dad looked at me like, what are you talking about? We're eating dinner right now. And I remember thinking for the first time, like, wait, it's not normal to talk about like bodily functions at the dinner table for most people. And Greg, if you're listening, I love you. I know that you can handle this now. We're on a good page. But that was what was normalized in our house. At the dinner table, we could talk about just about anything because our parents wanted to create that culture and that environment of transparency and openness, and it happened in small little ways that were bled out over time. And as a matter of fact, my dad normalized the types of discussions that many families would really find repulsive. My dad normalized discussions about temptation and battles with pornography and masturbation and how do we address these issues in a biblical way. He created a safe space for me to ask my questions about sex and sexuality and how did God design all of this. Now, did I actually take him up on those opportunities? Not nearly as often as I wish that I did. As I look back, I saw so many open doors for me to go to my dad and speak with him. And I remember it was probably my freshman or sophomore year of high school. I went on a missions trip with my dad, took us as a youth group to Portland, Oregon to help with a homeless rescue mission. And I had the opportunity to speak in front of everybody there. And I remember just feeling convicted before going on stage and telling one of the leaders there, like, I can't do this. I have a porn addiction and nobody knows about it. And she encouraged me to share it with everybody. And that was the first time my dad heard I'd been struggling with porn. Now maybe he knew on his own. But the way that he approached me with such grace and tenderness, and he never shamed me for it. He always created an open door for vulnerability and transparency. Now there's a theme here. My dad always knew how to create an adventure out of something. And on that adventure, there was always an opportunity or an open door for transparency. I remember it was my therapist in Iowa who helped to bring up this concept of like the fact that I couldn't fully process my past experiences until I was 25, and so now I turned 25 and I starting to dig through these things of my past and realizing like, oh, there's some big things that I haven't dealt with yet, and like numbness. Like a different counselor helped me understand when I experience the feeling of the emotion of numbness, it's my body and my mind and my emotions trying to cover up for something that's too difficult for me to process or I'm not ready to process yet. And so I know that it's just probably in the last year or two, I started to understand this level of bitterness I held towards this 19-year-old boy who treated my dad like crap. Like this 19-year-old, my dad tried to influence him and to build him up, to encourage him. He was always in his corner and always showing up like at his soccer games, at church, like building him up. This 19-year-old was just a jerk to my dad. And really, it's easy sometimes to forgive other people. Well, sometimes. But sometimes it's significantly more difficult when it's yourself you have to forgive. And I've started to realize over the last couple of years how much I needed to forgive myself. Because as a 19-year-old, that was me being a jerk to my dad. And I remember on December 11th of 2015, my dad and I sat on the couch downstairs next to the Christmas tree, and my dad asked me a simple question. He said, Zach, this Sunday I'm teaching at church about what it means to be a son of God. What do you think it means? And I said, Dad, I don't care right now. I'm waiting for a call from my girlfriend. My girlfriend, who's now my wife, was about to leave on a missions trip to China with YWAM, Youth of the Mission, and I was going to get to talk to her for 2 months. So I went upstairs, I took the phone call, and then I went down, and my dad had since gone upstairs to get ready for bed. And I just, that was honestly, that was the last real conversation that my dad tried to have with me before he had his stroke 4 days later on December 15th of 2015. And when he had his stroke and I get this phone call from my mom, hey, you need to meet me at the hospital. Lana, one of our family friends, actually our godparent, was picking up my siblings at school and they were going to meet us there. And I walked in and I saw her in a state that I'd never seen my mom before. And she told me he had a stroke and they were trying to figure out what to do. And it's crazy because he was actually at coffee with a young guy he was mentoring. And it happened with this kid partially, and he started bringing him to the hospital. And so I'm looking at my dad on the hospital bed. My mom's on my right, and dad's in front of me, and dad is literally a vegetable at this point. His eyes are kind of faintly looking around, but there's no cognitive movement. There's no body movement. And normally they would operate on a stroke patient, or at least medicate in a particular way. But because of all of his previous brain surgeries and things he'd experienced from the past, he had a pituitary tumor, multiple incisions in his skull, and it was just too much damage already done. So they couldn't operate. And I'm looking at my mom, who's been working in a hospital her whole life, essentially now looking at her husband experiencing one of the very things that she saw almost every day. But now it's now it's your husband, the man that you care the most about in life. And I looked at my mom distraught, and this switch flipped in my brain. A switch that I honestly didn't know existed, actually, until a couple years later when I began to process what took place. But the switch took place as I see my dad is in a vegetative state, and I see my mom distraught and broken and asking all the doctors what's going to happen. And all of a sudden I go from the 18, 19-year-old selfish jerk to realizing, and don't get me wrong, I've still got those attributes. But now I have to step in where my dad cannot be the dad anymore. And I didn't think this cognitively in the moment. I wasn't thinking I need to be dad now. I need to be the man of the house now. But this instinct just kicked in where I knew that I needed to step it up. And a part of my upbringing or natural growth and development process, I think, was stunted for a time. I had to skip some steps. And I think anybody who may be listening or even someone who's experienced some sort of trauma, whether watching a family member go through something or you yourself experiencing something traumatic, big T trauma or little t, I think that you might be able to relate in the sense that your brain had to shut down in order to not go into full shutdown mode. Like you had to be on pause, essentially, just for a time, so that you could step into a different role and a different mindset. And so that's what I began to experience. And that time it was difficult. It was hard, but man, I saw my dad never made a full recovery from that stroke. He continued to battle and he fought, but just because they couldn't operate, that blood clot never left that space that was blocking the movement and activity in the right side of his body. He was paralyzed and he had aphasia, so one half of his mouth was also paralyzed, but he couldn't speak the words that came to mind. So he got to a point a number of months later where he could kind of walk around on one leg, actually a testament to his strength. Like he got out one day and actually mowed the lawn with a brace on his leg and only one leg moving, one arm moving, and just walking around. He had one eye closed from a previous surgery that was blind. Like this guy was so freaking strong and strong-willed in his heart. And every time I'd have a conversation with him, he would remind me, just trust in Jesus. There were very few words I could understand him say, but anything that he spoke about his relationship with God was clear as day. I remember it was January then of 2017. We were in the hospital again, and again, he hadn't made a recovery. We weren't sure what was going to happen at this point. My mom and I took him to his this doctor's appointment, looking after an MRI with his neurosurgeon, and an MRI, or the neurosurgeon, looked at us very plainly and said what we quite honestly were waiting for. And he said, James, you have 6 months to live. I don't know what all of these growths are inside of you, or this peculiar health issue going on in your body, but you have less than 6 months. And with less than 6 months, so we get out. My mom was about to go on a shift that day, and she had to go to a quick grab something from her office before she came home. And I drove my dad home, and in the car, I remember so clearly, he looks over at me And with the few things I could understand him say, it took a couple times, but I know that this was true. He looked at me and he said, "Zach, God told me when I was your age," I was 20 at the time, "God told me when I was your age that I was going to die before I was 50. And I know that this is true because later on, my aunt, his sister, actually told me that he told her the same thing a couple years before his stroke. But in that moment when he told me that, when he said those words, and I said it back, and he said, "Yes, that's," he nodded to agree, that's what he said. I just felt peace. I just knew that God had this under control, that I had nothing to fear. I didn't have to worry because God was moving. And God was doing something. And I couldn't see. But God used that moment for me as a blue chair, an upside down rocker that God knew that I would be able to use not only to experience peace in my own life, but to share as a testament of God's goodness. And that nothing ever takes him by surprise. Nothing ever takes God by surprise. March 14th, 2017, my mom called me and said he's close. And so my wife and I, we went over, and all my siblings went over to the house, and Dad was laying in bed. He was on bed rest at the time. And he called all of us around the bed. He asked us to sit on the edge of the bed. He pointed, sit here, with the words that he had. And it's just, oh my goodness, this incredible, incredible moment. Just imagine if you've read the story of Jacob, who was Israel, gathering his 12 sons around and giving them each a blessing, some more favorable than others. But my dad gathered us around the bed, and he looked at each of us. And there wasn't much that he said that was understandable from his aphasia. We just couldn't quite get there, and he was on his last legs. But there was one thing I know that was clear. Trust in Jesus. Don't give up. Trust in Jesus. Don't give up. And so as we prayed with my dad, and together we said our goodbyes, and we knew this might be the last time, we went home, my wife and I, and we got a call the next morning from my mom. She said that he was unconscious and very quickly fading. And so we went over, and we saw as my dad was taking his last breaths, and not too long later, he was gone. And trust in Jesus. Don't give up. Trust in Jesus. Don't give up. The words continually rattle in my mind that my dad would speak in his darkest, most terrifying moments, that so many would walk away from faith. But he held strong. He walked as the light. Little did I know that upside down rocker would play such a significant part in my transformation. There've actually been multiple parallel moments in my life as I've shared seemingly small moments, interactions, decisions, conversations, just upside down rockers that led to where I am today. Honestly, that led to this very podcast. It's through my own life experiences, not better or more spiritual or more impactful than yours, just a story that I pray God uses. And through my own transparency over the coming episodes, because trust me, I will be transparent through the talks, through the prayers, through the conversations. I pray that God would bring light to your own experiences and show you how he can use them for his glory. Truly believe it. Trust in Jesus. That is, after all, okay, I believe all of this, the very purpose in our own lives is to be light. As we will discover, God didn't just give us the true light that was Christ on earth, but his very Spirit, the Spirit of God alive in everyone who believes in him. You, followers of Jesus, hear me, are the light of the world. You're a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. Let your light shine so that all those who witness your good works, the way you live, the way you care, the way you never give up on the Lord. Would you give glory to God in heaven? Trust in Jesus. Invite God to shine light on the upside-down rocker moments in your life, regardless of what you believe or where you stand. Because small things from your past oftentimes are things that God may want to use to build your character and define your calling. The way of light is far more than just a one-time decision, guys. The way of light is a way of living, a lifestyle of light. It's a path that few will choose, but it's truly worth taking because it's the only one with clarity, healing, direction, understanding, and purpose. So, would you journey with me as we learn to walk together in the way of light?